My name is Lou Rich, and I was born in Bay City. Grown up in a pretty dysfunctional family. My father was an alcoholic and was not home very much. And due to that, my parents divorced when I was about 12 years old. And that was one of the first traumatic experiences of my life. I believe that has a lot to do with my beginning of substance use. As my years continued in my adulthood, I had a lot of traumatic grief and loss in my life, beginning with my mother. She died when I was 20 years old. The substances, the use increased. Had some hatred towards God because of taking my mother from me. And it just seemed like the loss seemed to continue throughout the years. Since then, I have lost a best friend and my half-brother, and substance use continued, changed, increased. Certain drugs weren't working, so it would lead me to other drugs. I had a house, brand new house, and a wife, and a decent job. Lost all of that due to my addiction. Material things, motorcycles, toys, jobs. I've lost several jobs due to my addiction. My father went to heaven in 2009. 6 months later, my half-sister was found floating in the Saginaw River. And through all these losses, the anger continued to build, and resentments towards God that I've turned my back on for so many years because of this anger and hatred. Thinking I was being punished was my thought. God was punishing me for my lifestyle and my sin. My son Caleb was 10 years old. He was a high-risk asthmatic. He had food allergies, in and out of the hospital throughout his childhood. October of 2011, he was with me on a visitation. He told me he needed a breathing treatment. I set him up with a breathing treatment, and it just didn't help. So we did a second treatment, and it didn't help either. It just spiraled so quick. Caleb started losing consciousness while we were on the phone with 911. Soon his lips turned blue and his eyes rolled back in his head and his body fell lifeless onto the table. Well, me and my friend laid him on the floor and started CPR on Caleb. It seemed like forever for the sirens, for the first responders. I know it was a matter of minutes, but it just seemed like forever before they got there. As we got into the treatment room, there was still a nurse on top of Caleb on the gurney. The look of desperation on this nurse's face, I'll never forget. The sweat and the redness of her face. She was just trying her hardest to save Caleb's life. We went back to the waiting room, and the doctor came out and said that he was sorry. And it was the worst feeling, worst moment of my life. And at that point, I didn't know what to do, so I went outside, and I think I kicked the trash can, and I punched the door. And I remember screaming, why, God, why? I remember my daughter being outside, falling to her knees, crying hysterically. And I still have the mental pictures of that day in my head. I had hatred and resentment towards God because of all the loss of my other siblings. And my father and my mother, and this was like the final straw, and I was very angry. My addiction continued to use substances like 6 months after Caleb's death, and in that time, I got very sick, very weak, and I wound up in the hospital with pneumonia. And a friend of mine, I called him for some words of encouragement. He showed up with his pastor. But as the pastor and my friend sat in the room, the pastor asked me about my belief in Jesus and if I wanted to accept him back into my life. He reassured me that God was not punishing, that God was loving and caring, and that was always there for me. And it was me that turned my back on him. So as I accepted his offer, we joined hands and prayed for the Lord to come back into my life. And we repented all of my sins at that time. And as I opened my eyes, the sunlight beamed behind the pastor, and it was just so amazing, the feeling that came over me. It was just like God had entered into my heart at that time. And something started changing in me to where I didn't want to use substances anymore, but I didn't know what to do. I took it upon myself to check into a detox facility and then follow that up with residential treatment for my substance abuse. Until I got clean and sober, I didn't accept the loss of my son. I was covering the pain and the grief with the substances. I've been clean and sober going on almost 10 months now. And I still have times today, even though I found my Savior, I still have them days like if I'm grieving where I can have anger towards God. And it's something I work on daily. The closer I get to the Lord now, it's like the blessings just keep happening. Recently took some training to be a recovery coach in the community. It's something that I feel was a calling from God, is just to use my ability to help others. Yeah, I know in my addiction that I never even thought of a purpose in life until getting clean and sober. The addiction robbed me of goals and dreams. Just to have God in my life today and to believe that all things are possible. The world is wide open to me. I have choices today. I have freedom to go to school if I want to, or to pursue my dreams. Today I look forward to tomorrow to see what other doors are going to open for me, what other blessings are going to fall upon me. Hi, I'm Lou, and I'm blessed to have God in my life today.